Hey everyone, it's Trevor here with another real estate market update for the Edmonton area. This is looking at the most recent statistics available from the Realtors Association of Edmonton, which is the August statistics. So we're doing the September update. So let's jump right into the report. We're gonna look at the greater Edmonton area and also just the city of Edmonton. And I'm gonna jump back and forth looking at a few different infographics here that were prepared by the Realtors Association of Edmonton. So let's jump right into it. So starting with greater Edmonton area, the selling price for all residential properties that were sold averaged $377,000, which is a 5.5% drop from last month in July, and a 2.1% drop year over year, which would have been comparing it to August 2021. Now that's a pretty significant drop in average price, 5.5%. And as we get further into this, I will have some other commentary about that. The average price does not equal the same thing as what the actual value of a property is. There have been a lot of changes going on with interest rates increasing multiple times during the course of this year, and they're still going to go up a little bit more, but the average price is not equal to the value. So just because the average price dropped by 5.5%, that doesn't mean that any particular property dropped by 5.5%. When interest rates go up, a lot of people start buying lower priced properties because their max purchase price has gone down. So that will start to drag down the average price. So let's keep going. I'll mention that a few other times here, especially when we start talking about the benchmark price in comparison. So looking at the median price, which is that midpoint, that means 50% of the properties are selling below that, 50% are selling above. That was sitting at $360,000 for the greater Edmonton area, which is also down 5% for the month and down 1.4% for the year. Now looking over at single family homes, the average price was $469,000, which was down 4.1% for the month and up 1.8% for the year. And the median was sitting at $435,000, which was down 2.8% for the month and up 3.6% for the year. So we're seeing, again, pretty big drops in the average prices, and the median prices tend not to be down quite as much. And part of that is because it's the midpoint instead of just the average. The average gets manipulated a lot by if there's not as many high price sales, but also if there's a lot of lower price sales. Now looking over at condos, the average price was sitting at $220,000, which is down 4.2% for the month and down 3.3% for the year. And for the median price condo was sitting at $200,000, which was down 5.7% for the month and down 7% for the year. So as you can see, condos are still suffering quite a bit, seeing some pretty significant drops. It's been a soft condo market for years now, so if you've been looking to sell in that market, you're probably well aware, unless you haven't looked at it for a while. You have to be really realistic if you're selling a condo. What you paid for the house or what you paid for the condo is not really relevant to the current market value. In a lot of cases, it's going to be less than what you bought it for, depending on when you bought it. Now looking over at duplex and row houses, the average was sitting at $361,000, which was down 3.3% for the month and up 1.5% for the year. And the median was sitting at $352,000, which was down 3.1% for the month and up 4.8% for the year. So far, based on averages in the greater Edmonton area, the duplex row houses are still up the most for the year. Even though we've been seeing drops across the board in everything the last couple of months here, we're still up in some cases for the year on average prices and median prices. I do think if the trend continues, that'll probably change and we'll start seeing potentially some negative numbers on a year over year basis. But the benchmark price is going to be a little bit better of an indicator for us to look at there. So now let's take a look at the number of new listings. So new listings for the current month, there was 3,156 new listings in the greater Edmonton area, which, just so you know, that does include Edmonton, but also a lot of surrounding communities as well. We'll be looking at Edmonton next. So that's down 10.5% for the month. So we're seeing the number of new listings coming on the market is starting to slow down. If you've been watching my videos for a while, or if you've ever chatted with me, I tell a lot of my clients that we are kind of at peak inventory right now at this time of year. There's a lot more to choose from for buyers, but that will start to slow down as less people do list in the fall compared to what we see in the spring and summer months. So we might start to see some reducing inventory, or at least for now, we're seeing a reduced number of new listings coming on the market. So year to date, there's been 29,000 new listings, which is up just a little bit from last year, up 0.9%. And number of sales, this is actually the number of sales that are happening. So when somebody purchases a property In the current month, there was 1,808 sales, which was down 8.3% from last month. The year-to-date sales was sitting at about 19,000, which was down 12% for the year. So that's not as big of a drop as what we saw going from June to July. Last month, we had about a 25% reduction in number of sales. So we're still, the market's still slowing down, but not at as quick of a pace as it did last month. So that's not too bad. And as you can see, we have less sales, we have 12% less sales for the year compared to what we had last year. So it's pretty obvious at this point that in terms of number of sales, 2021 it looks like it'll end up being a stronger year than 2022. Even though we started off going really strong earlier this year, the story has definitely changed. Now looking at the total active inventory, we're sitting at just below 8,000 with 7,922 active listings at the end of August. And just looking over at high roller sales, you can see that we had a single family home that sold for $2,838,115. And the highest condo sold for $840,000, and the highest duplex / row house sold for $835,000. So the average days on market for the greater Edmonton area, single family homes were sitting at 37 days this year compared to 35 days last year. Condos were sitting at 54 days this year compared to 59 days last year, so a little bit quicker this year. Duplexes, 37 days versus 41 days last year, and the whole market as a whole is actually sitting on par at 42 days this year and 42 days last year. Okay, so now if we look at the same information, but this time for just the city of Edmonton, let's zoom in here. Before we do that, I do want to remind you that I am a realtor here in Edmonton with Yeg Pro Realty. So if you're looking at buying or selling a home in the Edmonton or any of the surrounding areas, I'd be happy to help you out. Whether you're buying or selling a condo, a single family home, or a duplex, I've got expertise in all those areas, and I can give you some very specific guidance based on your unique situation, your price point, what type of property you're selling, if you're selling. And I really suggest that you give me a call at 780-819-5508, or you can go to booktrevornow.com, select a time on my calendar, and then I'll call you for a free consultation where I'll just kind of find out what you're looking at doing, and I can give you some more specific guidance than the general sort of information that I can give you in this video. So let's continue with the video. Looking at the average price for the city of Edmonton, it was sitting at $371,000 for the market as a whole, which was down 7% month over month. Again, that's a pretty significant drop in average price. Even though average prices can be, like I said, manipulated by a lot of properties selling at a lower price point, or from having less properties selling at a higher price point, that's still a pretty big drop. And I would basically blame it on the increased interest rates that have been causing a deceleration in the market. A lot of buyers are getting very price conscious right now. They're very aware of what their monthly payments are going to be at different interest rates. And there's a lot of uncertainty among buyers as well. So there's more buyers holding back. They're deciding to kind of wait and see what happens with the market, or they're deciding to be a little bit more conservative in what they buy. Maybe they're approved to buy something for $400,000 and they decide to buy something for $300,000 instead, just so that they got a little bit of wiggle room in case interest rates go up. There's not as many buyers that are willing to stretch themselves super thin and go right to their max. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And that's sort of just a natural progression of what happens when interest rates go up, as buyers, which are always sensitive to the monthly payments, are just going to start looking at trying to get into properties at lower price points so that they can keep their payments below certain thresholds. So that's obviously having a big impact on the average prices and causing them to have some downward pressure on average prices. But as I mentioned earlier, that's not quite the same thing as value. It just could mean that the market's shifting from properties in a slightly lower price point for a lot of buyers. So the average price, like I said, was down 7% for the year. I meant for the compared to last month, and down 3.3% compared to last year. The median price was sitting at $350,000, which was down 6.7% from last month and down 2.8% for the year. And the average for single-family homes was sitting at $480,000, which was down 5.8% for the month, but up 2.2% for the year. Whereas the median price for single-family homes was $440,000, which was down 4.5% for the month, but still up 4.6% for the year. Now condos, the average was $214,000, which was down 4.6% for the month and down 2.9% for the year. And the median was sitting at $189,000, which was down 8.9% for the month and down 10.7% for the year. Now looking over at duplexes and row houses, the average was sitting at $369,000, which was down 2.6% for the month and 0.9% for the year. while the median was sitting at 362,000, which was down 3.6% for the month, but up 4.6% for the year. Now, the number of new listings in Edmonton was sitting at 2,428, which is a decrease as well. It's the number of new listings is down 8.2% month over month, whereas we're still up for the year with 22,000 new listings so far this year, which is up 2.3% compared to last year. A little bit more new listings than what we got last year by now, but not a significant difference. And the number of sales was sitting at 1,249 for the month, which I believe was a little bit higher than my prediction. If you lost my last video for the Edmonton market, I think I predicted 1,100 and something sales, so they actually held up a little better than I thought. But that's still down 8.9% for the month. But like I said, not nearly as big of a drop compared to last month, which was closer to 24-25%. Year to date, we were sitting at 14,000 sales, which is down 12.7% for the year. And inventory in Edmonton was 6,322. The high roller sales are probably all the same as they were for the greater Edmonton area, since they're usually in Edmonton, so I won't go over those again. And for the days on market this year, single family homes are averaging 39 days compared to 36 days last year. Condos are averaging 55 days compared to 60 last year. Duplexes and row houses, 37 days compared to 38 days last year. And the market as a whole sitting at 45 days compared to 43 days last year. Now let's take a look at some of the benchmark prices. This is a better price indicator in terms of value, since it's not going to be manipulated by lower priced sales or change in buyer behavior. It's going to be more about the actual value of a typical benchmark home. So if we look at the MLS Home Price Index, the benchmark price for the greater Edmonton area was sitting at $399,000, which was down 2.8% from last month, but up 4.3% from last year. So this shows you that the market's still seeing a significant shift in actual values, but not as big of a shift as what the average price will tell you. And if you look over on the right here, you can see the benchmark price trend. You can see starting in January, we started to have a run up in prices that sort of peaked in April, May. We saw a pretty significant increase from February to May. And then it kind of flattened out in May and June, where it was staying relatively level. And then starting in July, that's when we saw our first sort of significant drop in the benchmark price in the greater Edmonton area. And now we're seeing an even bigger drop compared to last month. So this is significant, don't get me wrong. Some of the people that are releasing information, including the press release itself, called it a small drop. If we wouldn't have called it, let's just put it this way, I don't think they would have called it a small drop if it was the same number but an increase in 1 month. That is something that is significant. It's not like we're getting murdered out here or anything, and it's not as bad as what's happening in Vancouver and Toronto, but that is a significant change in the benchmark price in 1 month. Like, we're talking about 2.8% of the value of a property in 1 month. You could imagine if that happened for every month for the year, you're talking about, like, you know, more than a 20% change in price. So just to kind of put that into perspective, I'm not surprised by this. Like, all the increases in interest rates really did slow down the market a lot. And I'll be one of the first to tell you, it slowed down the market quicker and more severely than I would have thought it would. The market was a lot more sensitive to the interest rates than I initially anticipated. It's pretty complex in terms of how the market can be affected by different factors all over the world, but it's definitely having an impact. We're still a resilient market compared to Vancouver and Toronto because our prices were not nearly as inflated as theirs, but we're certainly not immune to it, and you can see that reflected in what's going on with the benchmark prices. Now, we already looked at the averages. This is just to kind of remind you, like, the averages are bigger numbers than what we saw in the change in the benchmark price. So we got 2.8% drop in the benchmark versus a 5.5 for average and a 5 for median. I'd give the most weight to the benchmark price, but what you see happening in the average prices can help tell you more about where buyers are buying properties. So higher priced properties, you have a shrinking pool of buyers since there's more of them that want to be in a lower price point. Now, if we look at the benchmark price for specific property types, it was sitting at $452,000 for single family homes, which is a 3% drop from last month, but we're still up 4.6% for the year. Apartments, the benchmark price was sitting at $187,000, which was down 1.2% from last month and 0.1% from last year. And townhouses were sitting at 251,000, which were down the least actually from last month, down 0.7% from last month and up 7.6% for the year. So townhouses in Greater Edmonton have actually been, at this point, outperforming everything else in terms of benchmark price. And this is also not so surprising because as the interest rates went up, we had a lot of people that weren't necessarily able to buy a single family home anymore. And the next best thing for a lot of people is getting into a townhouse. You can still have a relatively similar lifestyle. You can still get a 3-bedroom home with, 2.5 baths. You might have a basement, you might have an attached garage. So the lifestyle change going from a single family home to a townhouse is a little bit easier to swallow than going from a townhouse to an apartment or something like that. So I do think that's helped keep the townhouse market performing quite well compared to some other parts of the market. Now, if we look at the same information just for the city of Edmonton, the benchmark price was sitting at $391,000, which was down 3% from last month and up 4.1% from last year. So you can see it's down a little bit more than it was in the Greater Edmonton area. And again, if you just compare that to the average and the median prices, you can see it's not like it's like less than half the amount of a drop for the benchmark price compared to the averages and the median, which is the same sort of story I was telling you before. You'll see this is the same trend over here on the right. We're definitely seeing a significant change in the market. For single family homes in Edmonton, the benchmark was sitting at $456,000, which was down 3.2% for the month, but still up 4.3% for the year. For apartments, it was $183,000, which is down 1.6% for the month and down 0.7% for the year. And townhouses sitting at $242,000 for the month, being down 0.9% for the month and up 8% for the year. So that pretty much wraps it up. I've got another more in-depth video coming up here relatively soon once I've got all my infographics done. So make sure you tune in for that one. If you like these types of videos talking about the Edmonton real estate market, make sure to like this video, leave a comment and subscribe. That way I know I'm giving you guys good value here. And of course, if there's anything I can help you out with, feel free to reach out to me at 780-819-5508. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. You can check out another video over here. There's a playlist, and over here you can click to subscribe. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.